The stress level. Actually, not bad. Not bad. I really enjoy the work that I do. I enjoy the people that I work with. And I would say the stress level is relatively low in this role, especially if I'm comparing it to my previous role. Based on the size of the organization, that was a much higher stress level job. So I'm really enjoying this job and enjoying learning and getting to experience new things within this industry.
You know, I think there's a real truth to that. I think for anybody at any level, wherever they are, especially too, you know, we've got managers who are just out of high school, right? And this may or may not be their first experience at leadership. And sometimes it can get overwhelming with all the things that people have to do. But if you have a passion for what you do, it doesn't feel like stressful, right? What do you do to decompress?
Go to the gym.
Oh, do you?
I go to the gym and go to my kids' sporting events.
It's obvious that I do too. Every day. Just kidding. That's fantastic. Tell me a little bit. So when we teach Management 202, we talk a lot about using different tools to create game plans, calendars, to-do lists, maintaining strong organization of our responsibilities. It's the only way that you can manage your time that way, right? So I would imagine that you've got to have some pretty incredible skills at this. What do you use? What kind of routines have you built around it, or tools that you use to be able to keep yourself organized?
So it's the 5 Ps. Do you know the 5 Ps? You ever heard this before?
Yeah, but probably for everyone else, they probably need to hear this.
Proper planning.
Proper planning, of course.
Prevents poor performance.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
That came from one of my bosses very early in my career, and I have found that to be extremely helpful regardless of the situation. If you are planful and you take the time and put forth the effort up front, again, it usually works in the end.
You know, it's funny you'd say this. So, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I went to a workflow seminar. And halfway through, I had this sort of revelatory aha moment where the clouds parted and the sun shone down on me. But the guy says to us, he said, who here makes to-do lists? And, you know, a bunch of hands went up and he started asking why. And the answers that people gave were so I don't forget, like, you know, duh, right? And he said, I'm going to challenge you from now on to never, ever make another to-do list for that reason again. And everybody went, what? What is he talking about? He said, from now on, I want you to make every to-do list so that you can forget everything.
Oh.
And I had never done it up to that point, and it really kind of resonated with me how often we psychologically do the task over and over again in our attempt to remember it, and how exhausting it becomes, and how much time we spend after we've completed one to go, what was I supposed to do next? And if you know how to read your own handwriting, he said, and if you know where you kept it, you'll never go wrong.
You don't want to see my notebook and all the to-do lists that are in my notebook. And I take a lot of notes, so that's one thing I do. I take a lot of notes. I make to-do lists. At home, from a planning perspective, this is really bad, so you'll see that I am type A after I explain this. But I have a organization system in our pantry. So it has a whiteboard, it has a calendar. I plan the menu every week. I do the grocery shopping and have everything come in, make the menu out so my husband then knows what to cook and what to do. So the calendar gets pretty hectic, so we have to have everything on the board so that everybody can see. We have a different color pen for each person. The dog even has his own color because, you know, there are things Mo has to do too, so that's pretty important.
What does an average day look like for you? You know, obviously at a high level, but like, you know, how does it start? What do you do throughout the day on an average day?
Yeah, if it's a work day, I'm usually up fairly early, sometime between 5 and 6, and I always have breakfast with Ty. That's kind of our thing to do. So my husband sleeps in a little bit. Ty and I have breakfast, and then we start to get ready and go on with our day. And if it's a work day, it could mean, you know, heading to the airport, jumping on a plane, going to travel to one of the markets and brands that we have. If I'm going to be in the office, I have about a 35-minute drive to the office, and then it's usually meetings and calls for the entire day. That's a work day. On the weekend, I wish I could say that I slept in, but you know, you get in a habit and it just doesn't work that way. But we usually have a lot of sporting events to attend, and then just like everybody else, you have to cook, you have to do cleaning, you have to do laundry, you have to get everything caught up to start the week over again.
So let's say all the HAFTAs are done.
Okay.
All the HAFTAs are done. It's a perfect day off.
Okay, that doesn't happen. You realize that, right? But okay.
Just go with
me. We'll pretend.
What does that perfect day off, if you could just do whatever you wanted, where do you go? What do you do?
Yeah, I tell them all the time, I'm just waiting for that day where I can sit on my couch because it just doesn't happen. If it was a day with nothing to do, I would love to be able to read a book or just watch some TV and a movie. Anytime we go out to dinner with friends, I always feel like I'm on the outside looking in because I just don't have the time to watch TV and catch up with all the shows and everything that some of our friends do. So,
I see.
Can
you give us the 40,000-foot view of what's next for Spotless?
Oh, that's an exciting question. So it's good. Right now at Spotless, we have about 180 stores, just maybe a little over. And by the end of 24, we want to be just over 200. So we still have a lot of growth coming in all of the brands, but mostly in our CobbleZONE footprint and in our flagship footprint. So kind of our West Coast and our East Coast a little bit. But that we have a lot of that coming. We're also still very much focused on our integration efforts and on getting consistency in our format and our operating habits. So I can give you an example on the integration piece.
Yeah.
You probably already know about this, but we can share it with the rest of the team.
Let's do it.
One of the work streams that we're really going to be focused on is training and development. So we are looking at taking inventory of all the training that we have in the field and then loading everything into our new LMS system and building from there. And as you well know, CobbleZONE is probably slightly ahead of some of the other brands in the materials that they have and the structure that you have. So really excited to have Chad jumping in and helping us on that front and going to kind of be leading the effort for us in the field on how we coordinate, organize, and I would say probably synchronize our training for all the brands. And I know you and Spencer will be a big part of that as well. So I'm very excited that we're kicking that work off and looking forward to what we're going to be able to do there.
It's so exciting. And you heard it here first, folks. CobbleZONE will be helping to pave that way for the entire company. And something you just said that is also really exciting, and I talk about this a lot during our new hire orientation when we want to talk to people about how much opportunity truly exists within this organization. We start a little bit by talking about CobbleZONE, the market that we're in, the markets that we're in between Arizona and Colorado, and transfer opportunities that can exist within there. And the idea that, on one of our previous podcasts, Jason alluded to next year, we might even be looking at going into another market, which is really exciting as well. But even looking at our four brands, looking at Spotless as one unified company, there's so much opportunity coming. 200, potentially 200 stores in the next coming years, to be able to have so much opportunity throughout the United States for people to go to. That's really exciting.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. There's a lot of growth out there, and I think we have some great training materials that can help people to build their career here.
Yeah.
So.
With your extensive experience in leading teams, what kind of advice do you have for our leaders when it comes to building strong teams, maintaining the integrity of those folks, and leading people to success?
Okay, I think it first starts with the individual, with the leader. You have to build your brand, and when you build your brand, and if you build it in the right way, people will want to work for you. So I know you did a session at CobbleZONE a couple months ago or weeks ago, I don't know time frame, on reputation. And building your reputation, building your brand's kind of the same thing. You build your brand like what I talked about earlier with that consistency, with that discipline, with that dedication, and then you start to have people who want to come and work for you. Along with that, I think you also have to have transparent and proactive communication with your team. I think that's a big part of that. And some of the principles, I don't know if you want me to share it and go into this much detail, but some of the principles I used in my later years at Walgreens when I had a very large team. And, as you move up through the ranks, I think you also start to really understand the importance of having a high-performing team. Because when you're, at other positions within the organization, you might be able to jump in and do a lot of the things yourself. But when you get to a certain point in your career, you can no longer do that. The scale at which you're overseeing and the number of tasks that land on your plate, you can't do it all by yourself. So you really understand the importance of a high-value team and a high-performing team, I should say. And some of the principles that I used in that, the first was trust. You have to build trust with your team. If you can't get that trust, then you can't move on to the other things that I'm going to talk about. But trust, key, very important. Second, after the trust comes the empowerment. Because if you truly trust your team, they're going to feel empowered by you to go and do the work. And they're going to know what your expectations are. They're going to know what you want and where you want to be pulled in. But that empowerment really makes them feel better about the work that they're doing. So you have those two components that I think work together. And then as the leader, you have to come in and you have to have that accountability. So you give them the empowerment, you let them go out there and do, but you have to drive that accountability to make sure things are landing in the proper way, and you do that through providing feedback. And it's kind of a cycle that just goes for you. The problem is if there's someone who's not meeting the expectations or not rising to the occasion when you've empowered them to go and do the work, then you as a leader have to recognize that and have to be willing to have a conversation. And that sometimes is tough, but it's also necessary.
Yeah, and anything less, right? To somebody who is not meeting that performance, I always like to say, to not share that information with them is a disservice to that employee.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So you have to provide that feedback and let them know, because when you get into that cycle and you have that feedback, it's not that they may need to leave the company or anything like that. It may just be they need to sit in a different seat or be in a different role, and they could then really excel. But being able to have the confidence and have the relationship with your team to have those types of very transparent conversations, that's a part of what makes a team really high performing. And to your point, even though it's difficult sometimes to have those conversations, in doing so, the rest of your team sees that.
Yeah.
And the expectations just continue to rise. But if you as a leader don't recognize that and address that, it can work in the opposite way.
Yeah.
And take your higher performers and, they may lose some of their respect and...
Yeah, why am I working so hard if it doesn't matter?
Exactly.
Yeah. The big thing here, I think, that has a lot to do with what you've just said is delegation and giving people the opportunity to rise to the challenge. And you've got a lot of folks who are either their behavior is informed by having trust shattered previously or lack of experience, but you end up being in a position where you try to do everything yourself. And I truly feel that if you were to do that, you would be the hardest working manager to ever work so hard and to be the failingest failure who ever failed. I say that a lot, and just to try and help people to understand that you can't do it yourself.
You can't do it all yourself. You cannot.
Now, you have the eyes and the ears of the entire CobbleZONE team right now, from regional and district folks all the way to GMs and their teams. If you could
I hope we still have them. We haven't bored them to where we don't have their attention anymore.
We better. I'd like you to pick one priority, just one thing that you want each of them to be aware of, to focus their efforts on. What would that one thing be?
I don't know if I can give you just one. I have a couple of things
let's do it in a couple.
That pop in my head. So I would say embrace change and be curious. We as an organization are still growing. There's going to be a lot of change that we continue to endure. And not just at Spotless, but also within the industry. So the industry is changing and evolving. And I think that's the piece that we have to recognize as a company, how much change is still going to be coming our way. So I think we have to embrace change. It's not always easy, but we have to embrace it and figure out how to roll with it and make the best of it. And the next piece then would be to be curious. I often get accused of asking way too many questions from coworkers to my husband, but sometimes they'd even call me rapid fire because all these questions pop in my head. I think it's important to be curious, to learn, and that kind of goes along with the change piece. As the change comes, ask the questions. Make sure you have a full understanding of what's happening, because when you really understand the why or understand the components of the change, it's much easier to process, move through, and to lead your teams through the change. So those would be my pieces of advice, or ask, however you want to categorize it.
I love it. And, for the managers out there, embracing change is absolutely crucial. And we also have to acknowledge that change is hard, right? Change is hard. But one of the biggest things that I think we've learned from our Management 101 and 202 classes is, and there's a quote, and the quote is fantastic. It has some, I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's something to the effect of, people don't mind changing. They just don't like being changed. And so managers, that's really crucial, I think, for you to keep in mind in how we present change to our teams to help them be a part of that as opposed to directive, right?
Right.
So thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, you're very welcome.
We truly, truly appreciate it. It's absolutely been amazing. So thanks again to Lisa Badgley, our Chief Operating Officer of Spotless Brands. And we'll see you next time. Make sure you stay purple, guys. And yeah, we'll see you next time.